This is a 1978 Toyota Celica liftback GT, and it's not special. It's a Japanese sports car of the late 70s. Except this one is. This is the exact car that my uncle, my grandfather and my father took as a demonstrator in our dealership back in Kings Lynn in Norfolk. Promptly stripped, tuned and took production saloon car racing. There were no frills back then, just the business's transporter and 3 drivers passionate about their racing. It's been bought and sold by a multitude of passionate family teams since then, but it's extra special now because I've bought it with the aim of returning it to its former glory and racing it as a family once more. Looking a little sad at the moment, I'm going to take you through the journey of getting this amazing little race car back on the road. Enough emotion for one day, let's get down to business. How did I come to own this Celica? Well, the car took part in the Will Hire 24 Hours at Snetterton in 1980 and again in 1981, with the various combinations of Father Martin, Uncle Robin and Grandfather John sharing the wheel. Across the 2 years it came away with back-to-back Commanders Cups, classic giant killer stuff for a modest Japanese coupe. After that, the Celica rolled through a couple of different hands, racking up solid class results in the National Production Saloon Car Championship. Along the way, it changed its look too, presenting with a maroon stripe and even a classy blue and white two-tone option as it kept evolving through the 80s and 90s. In 1989, it landed with another racing family who campaigned it properly in the Slick 50 Road Saloon Championship. Then it wandered off again into classic Group 1 touring car racing in the late 90s, before eventually, with the same family, turning up once more in 2007. It has not escaped the attention of the historic racing world that I renovate a few cars these days. I get 1, 2 or sometimes 10 "how about this one" emails from historic car brokers. It was one such email forwarding a listing from a racing car sales site which I forwarded on to my father as it claimed to be a family heirloom. The response: "I've never seen that one in my life, but the car in the bottom left corner is the one I want you to buy, fix and race." So here we are. The car was last looked at in 2014 for a complete restoration, bringing it back to Group 1 spec and securing all the paperwork it needed to race. But it's fair to say the 12 years since then have not been kind. Having recently completed a 9-year ongoing restoration, this competitive ex-Martin Brundle FIA GTV competition Celica is ready to race again. So what needs doing? Yeah, pretty much everything. After bringing the Celica in, we let it sit at Pearson's Engineering for 6 months while we finished last season's racing and sized up the job. Naturally, the first thing we did was try it up and down the private road. Standard Pearson's procedure. Only to decide that we wouldn't drive it any further after that hair-raising 100 metres. We then took it to Northampton Motorsport to check the power, and the figures were not great. That meant an engine refresh was probably in order because, let's face it, engines are at the heart of historic racing. We pulled the engine out and found the gearbox input shaft was seized and the engine was effectively rusted to the gearbox, which might explain why it didn't set the rolling road alight with power and torque. And whether gearbox and drivetrain were connected or not, pushing the car around yielded a very interesting noise. $18R engine straight hooked out of the bonnet of the liftback. The reason we've done that is because we really weren't sure. So journey of this car so far, what you haven't seen. It's been to the rolling road with our friends at Northampton Motorsport. Pretty inconclusive because we look for engine power obviously on the rolling road, but the transmission and drivetrain of the car is not the best. So we couldn't get a proper figure. There was so much resistance through the transmission that effectively the engine just couldn't put out its peak power. We know the engine's probably going to need a rebuild. We've also leaked the engine down, so that's the compression test where you effectively add compression to the cylinders and see how much air escapes from them. Statically, it leaked down pretty well. There wasn't too much air escaping from either the cylinder head or past the pistons, or indeed from any of the valves. So we're now, as you can see, going to isolate the engine and get a feel for where we stand with it. The last time this engine was tested properly on a dyno bench was back in 2014. We have no idea what it's capable of outside the car, or indeed no idea how well it's going to run. So this could be an expensive test to do. It was running a lot of ignition, a lot of advance when it sat in the car on the rolling road. So we're going to back that off a little bit for safety, and then just do a quick power run after making sure it's happy, and see how we get on. Based around that, we're going to decide if the engine needs to go back to DTW for a rebuild and tuning. DTW are the company that first rebuilt this engine in 1980 after it was sold by our family to another family to do production saloon car racing. It's not just the same company, it's David from DTW. The same man is going to rebuild this engine as rebuilt it back in the 1980s, and every time it's been rebuilt since. I drove last year my dad's county championship winning BMW to BMW 323. That car produces just over 200 horsepower at a push. This, I think they should be capable of high 180s, low 190s if they're tuned extremely well, and I mean balanced really nicely and working perfectly. It'll be a long way from that now. A lot of horses have escaped in the 10 years since 2014. But to be competitive, definitely at Goodwood in the Group 1 race, which is called the Win Percy Trophy, it will have to be making in the high hundreds, high 190 towards 200 horsepower, and it'll have to be relatively light as well. It's not about necessarily beating everyone in the world, this car, but I just want it to be the best it possibly can be to get it back on track and do it justice. Nice and safe behind the wall, because you never know what can happen when you run an engine on a dyno like this. Gary, who's the expert in these matters, who was evaporated as soon as the camera's been turned on in his textbook way, but he's going to give the engine a run, and we'll figure out through all of the info here. So scraping the base of 160 brake horsepower then, which is a long way away from what it should make.
Yeah, and that was at 130, that was at 32 degrees of ignition as well. We knocked it back from 47, which it had for a start, which in my opinion was way too much.
Yeah.
So I knocked it back to 32, which is a safer setting.
The plan is to have the car performing and looking exactly like that. An inspired Robin Brundle finished third in the Thruxton Monroe final. Did a lot of work on it in 1988, has been meticulous with their invoice keeping. DTW Engines, who I called the other day to do the engine rebuild on the engine which is sitting in the dyno. An invoice from them dated 10 years after the car was initially raced in 1989. So I couldn't believe that when I Googled this company from the 80s, they were still going. And I thought, well, who else are you going to use, right? So we'll be working with a vinyl team to get the car looking exactly as it did. But first of all, what we've got to do is get it running exactly as it did, which is job one.
So where are we? Let's take stock.
Engine has now been prized away from the gearbox, but neither of those really work. Chassis terrifying over the distance of around 100 metres, rear axle makes a noise, and we're unsure of the cause. Let's get into the important bit first and see what nasties lie within our engine block as it's rebuilt by DTW. At the same time, I'm going to tear into this chassis and see if we can get it looking a little bit more like a racer. That'll be day 2.